I'm ready. I'm good.
Good. Great. Good evening. Thank you for coming. We'll get started here. Just a real quick note. As most of you may be aware, Danville had a significant loss here recently. So in between the Pledge of Allegiance and the Lord's Prayer, we're going to have a moment of silence for Chase Lynch. Chase was a 2019 graduate of Danville Community High School. A very good young man that was just getting started in life, had a lot going for him. If any of you were blessed enough to know Chase, as Skippy as he was known, man, he was a good kid. He funny character, and he's going to be missed. So between the Pledge of Allegiance and Lord's Prayer, if we could have a few moments of silence on behalf of Chase, his family, and then, of course, his friends, because it's impacted quite a few in the community. So if you would stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you. Dr. Schaefer. Dr. Schaefer. We've already got it. Are there any amendments to the agenda this evening?
Mr. President, I have no amendments to request this evening. Thank you.
Any board members? None? Okay. We'll move on to agenda item 2, recognition of accomplishments. Dr. Schaefer.
Yes, again, this month we have our Students of the Month to recognize, and I think we have 3 this evening. And we're going to start out with our Student of the Month from North Elementary, who Mrs. Perkins will introduce.
Good evening. I'm introducing our North Elementary Student of the Month, Miss Reagan Gunter. Reagan is the daughter of Jessica Rubeck and Kendall Gunter. She is in 2nd grade and her teacher is Mrs. Blair. Our Student of the Month, Reagan Gunter, has 2 favorite parts of her day at school, lunch and recess. Beyond that, she really likes to learn about math. She told me that she doesn't consider herself a strong math student and that she likes trying to learn more and get better. What a great growth mindset. Each day after school, Reagan enjoys being able to tell her family about her day and then to listen to them tell her about theirs. When she's not in school, Reagan plays softball and basketball. It's softball season, and Reagan shared that while she plays several different positions, shortstop is her favorite because that's where the action is. Reagan has an older sister and a younger brother, and she likes family movie time. Recently, they've been watching Yes Day together quite a lot. Reagan's favorite thing about her parents is that they take her places like Florida. She had a great time on their spring break trip to Cocoa Beach a couple of weeks ago, and if she could go anywhere for a day, she would go back there. Reagan has 2 career paths in mind for her future. She would like to be a professional athlete, and when she's done with that, she would like to nurse oceanic animals back to health. After learning all of this great stuff about Reagan, I asked her if there was anything else I should know about her that she didn't get a chance to tell me. And she shared that she loves ice cream. Mint chocolate chip and cookies and cream ice cream are her favorites, and she is a girl after my own heart. Mrs. Blair says the following: I nominated Reagan Gunter for Student of the Month because she is a model student. Reagan is an extremely hard worker and applies what she learns. She is kind and thoughtful to others and has empathy for students in the class. Reagan is also very schedule-oriented. She knows what is expected out of her school day and gets her supplies out before she is even asked. Even with this year's new unknowns, Reagan was always showing a smiling face, even under her mask. She keeps a positive attitude and definitely deserves the title Student of the Month. Congratulations, Reagan.
Congratulations, Reagan and family. Thank you very much.
And Mrs. No will introduce our Student of the Month from South Elementary.
South Elementary is proud to introduce Tiernan Miraldo as this month's Student of the Month. Tiernan is a student in Mrs. Legan's third grade class and is the son of Amanda and Matthew Miraldo. During a chat with Tiernan, I asked him what he liked most about school, and he said that he really likes math. He said his dad is good at math and that Tiernan thinks it's easy and fun. At home, Tiernan stays busy riding his bike and playing basketball, and he shared that he has 2 dogs named Jade and Chippy. He prefers playing with Jade because Chippy's just a little too wild. Tiernan shared that if he could do anything in the world he wanted, it would be the things that he normally does, like shopping at places like Five Below, going out to eat with his grandma and grandpa, and playing games like Jenga, Guess Who, and Life with his mom, dad, and sister. When asked who has been the greatest influence on him becoming the great young man that he is, he said that it was his mom and dad. He said his parents take really good care of him, and they hold him accountable if he's made a bad choice so that he learns to do the right thing. Tiernan would like to be an architect when he grows up. He said that he really enjoys building things and would love to know how to build a house. Miss McGee, our school counselor, shared that Tiernan is a rock star third grade student this year in Mrs. Legan's class. Tiernan is a student who is an all-around great kid who has a heart for everyone and a heart for the world as a whole. The times I've spent with Tiernan are always good, and he is looking to either help another student, better himself, or better the things around him. South is a school that finds responsibility, reliability, and the act of being safe extremely important, and Tiernan holds each of those things as high priorities for himself and in turn uses them daily. He's easily seen as a role model for all of his effort, and he is respectful to all staff members and peers. He has a kindness about him that makes your whole heart smile. I'm happy to nominate Tiernan as South Elementary Student of the Month and know he will continue to shine each and every day into his future. Congratulations, Tiernan.
Congratulations, Tiernan and family. Thank you for coming tonight and sharing with us.
And Mrs. Webster will introduce our Middle School Student of the Month.
All right. Each month, Danville Community Middle School selects one student from the entire student body who stands out among his or her peers. This month's student was chosen for his commitment to hard work, academic excellence, and his positive attitude in the classroom. This month, we have the distinct pleasure of honoring Landon Walters, 8th grader, with our Student of the Month award. Landon enjoys school and likes to socialize with his friends. His favorite class is U.S. History, as he likes learning about the events from the past. When I asked him if he could wave a magic wand and change anything about school, he said he would get rid of all the tests. When Landon is not in school, he enjoys playing on his gaming computer, listening to music, and watching sports. Landon doesn't have a favorite video game right now, but he appreciates rap and hip-hop music over the other genres. All basketball and football games are fun for him to watch. When I asked what he wanted to do in terms of a career, he wasn't totally sure, but he's interested in working with computers or maybe becoming a mechanic of some kind. Landon's parents inspire him to do and be his best through their love, coaching, and support. Landon's teachers are very fond of him and had these things to say. Mrs. Craddock says, Landon Walters has done a complete 180. At the beginning of the year, Landon would barely write 5 words during our 10-minute writing time, and he was extremely hesitant to interact with Mrs. Steigel or me. During the 3rd quarter, Landon really started to change. He would ask questions about assignments, make sure all assignments were completed on time, and answer questions in class. He was a completely different kiddo. For one of our final assessments in the 3rd quarter, Landon was asked to write an essay about our novel, Frankenstein, and he earned a 90%. Remember, this is coming from a student who would not write 5 words at the beginning of the year. I'm so proud of Landon, and right now I can tell that Landon is working hard to be the best student he can be, and I'm confident that will spill over into being a great leader in the classroom and helping others achieve their goals, just like he did. Mrs. McKinney adds, Landon has shown so much perseverance, growth, and improvement in the amount of effort he's put in to use his time in goal class and his overall work ethic. He's regularly pushing himself beyond his comfort level to comply with the expectations that we have for our 8th grade students. He's shown incredible growth over the last 2 years that he's been here with us, but especially during the 2nd semester of this year. Mrs. Hayes stated, Landon has shown extreme growth from starting with us in 7th grade to now. Landon has great work ethic, and it's been evident through all of his academic classes this year. He's continually shown improvement with participating in whole group instruction and speaks aloud to his peers and his teachers. He does a fantastic job of self-advocating for his needs in order to be successful. Landon has made it very clear that he has the necessary skills to be successful, not only in middle school, but now as he heads into his 9th grade year. Mrs. Berkey, math teacher, had this to share. Landon has shown tremendous growth in his 2 years at DCMS. He's not only dedicated himself to doing well academically, but he's also grown personally by stretching beyond his comfort zone to be an active and invaluable part of our learning community. Landon, we're proud of you for the growth you've shown both academically and personally. Keep up the great work, and congratulations to you for being an exceptional student at Danville Community Middle School.
Congratulations, Landon and family. Thank you for coming tonight and sharing it with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this evening, due to the weather, which is beautiful, softball team is playing. So our high school student of the month, Ella, we're going to recognize her probably next month, again, depending on the schedule, but we'll be sure to recognize her, but it just won't be able to be tonight due to the game.
Okay. We will move on to agenda item 3, reports to the board. Mrs. Webster's going to be giving us a presentation on the Danville Community Middle School.
Yes, and I have some great helpers here with me tonight. I have Mr. Mike Mays, who is PE and health teacher. I have Mr. Nick Callis, who is our business teacher, and Christy Pritchett, who is a kindergarten teacher, but she's also doing her administrative internship, so she's been helping us out a little bit here. So this is one of those good skills to check off presenting to the board. So I wanted to first start off with introducing what employability skills and talking to you about how we're embedding them into what we do at DCMS to prepare students for high school, college, and the workplace. You can see that they have divided the employability skills into basically 4 main categories. They're mindsets, learning strategies, work ethic, and social emotional skills. Go ahead. Background information is this stems from a Senate Enrolled Act 297. It allows students to be prepared for the ever-changing needs of the workplace. This is also based on the National Employability Skills Standards from the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education, the Indiana Department of Workforce Development Employability Skills Benchmarks, a lot of words there, and the Governor's Work Ethic Certificate, and the Indiana Department of Education Social Emotional Learning Competencies. Again, it's arranged in those 4 key areas of mindsets, work ethic, learning strategies, and social emotional skills. And they have these skills are basically K to 12. Okay? This is just a graphic I think you had in your packets, but it kind of breaks down. If you see on the kind of lime green mindsets, you can see that what's contained in that area. It talks about lifelong learning and self-confidence. Then it goes to learning strategies, and within that category, you have effective communication, decision-making, initiative, attention to detail, problem-solving, aptitude, and awareness. Moves on to work ethic, which contains self-discipline, independence, perseverance, time management, and organization, adaptability and integrity, and professionalism. And lastly, the social and emotional skills. It details connection, being able to work with others, being able to regulate your emotions, and manage how you handle all kinds of things that come your way, and your ability to collaborate. Okay. Now, I'm going to have my 2 teachers. We are they've been the guinea pigs this year and are piloting implementing this in their classes. So I'm going to let them talk to you about how this looks.
Okay. Again, I'm Mr. Mays, PE and Wellness. So Mr. Callis and I are going to talk a little bit about how we are implementing these in our related arts classes. So first in PE and Wellness, which is my area, students will learn to persevere, collaborate with one another, and be self-disciplined. What that looks like is they're working to respect teammates, opponents, and officials, push themselves to give their best effort daily, complete given tasks to the best of their abilities without prompting from teacher, so being self-starters, learn from failures and work to improve, growth mindset, communicate effectively and respectfully with peers, which can be a challenge in middle school, especially in games and sports when competition gets involved. We spend a lot of time with that one. Strategize and collaborate with one another. The benefit of this is it makes students hold themselves to high standards and learn from setbacks and failures, teaches students to work together towards common goals, and teaches students to communicate and compromise with one another. We measure this. We evaluate the skills during class and tally students who need redirection, and we also do it through exit tickets where students self-evaluate their effort level and their interactions with other students. So that's what PE and Wellness. And then for visual art, Mr. Bertola's class, the objective here is students can develop a growth mindset, problem-solving skills, and their attention to detail. They develop the confidence that they can achieve success through errors made in the learning process, push for continuous growth in skills, use their skills and knowledge. Students adapt to project expectations, demonstrate problem-solving skills through creative thinking and trial and error, and complete projects thoroughly and accurately. Work is of highest quality. Again, she spends a lot of time with growth mindset and teaching students that it's okay to fail. We learn from those failures and we improve. Again, a lot of middle school students really struggle with that and don't overcome disappointment and setbacks very well. So we spend a lot of time working with those. Benefit of this, students learn to approach challenges from different vantage points and can adapt to changing expectations. Problem solving through trial and error instills confidence in the belief that they can eventually succeed with effort and persistence. And again, the measurement in these performance-based classes like wellness and in art, we're doing tallies, students who need redirection, and then the exit tickets where they're doing self-evaluation of their level of effort and their interaction with students. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Callis.
Okay, as you guys already know, pardon me, I'm Mr. Callis, so I do the business and computer science. So fundamentally, we think the business standards, educational things that we're doing are very important at an elementary level because we're going to instill these skills into these students from the ground up, something that they can carry with them into life. And with my business classes, that's kind of what I want to utilize and understand. Collaborating with maybe individuals who aren't your best friends, people who you don't really talk to, have students self-evaluate their partners as well on group projects. Now, of course, this is a bit harder throughout COVID and things like that, but they've made it work really well. So developing that manager workplace relationship kind of mindset from a younger age and hoping to have that as a lifelong skill set. So you guys can kind of read and understand that. So the real big benefit though is that they will learn the skills that will not only benefit them throughout their academic career, but their professional career, because this is just a stepping stone to build on those skills. That's really what we think is important, to have that professionalism manner, especially when you go into the workplace when you're 14, 15, 16, having that first job, understanding kind of what those employers are looking for at a regular basis. And the measurements, like I said, that I tend to use in my class is that students will evaluate their peers on their collaborative skills during their group projects. And I also use that rubric to evaluate their overall communication skills and things like that. And then moving on to Miss Crosby's class, our ag teacher, she does very, very well with time management. It's mind-boggling how well she does. She really helps teach the students to learn effective time management. And if anybody's like me, that's something we could all get just a little bit better at. She does a good job by, as you can see the chart here that we implemented, the date, the proposed accomplishment for the date, throws that employability skill in there with that work time and that actual accomplishment. So what she does is she has them on the board. She writes, okay, this is what you should get done today. She asks them to list kind of how they're going to achieve that for the day. So kind of making that goal set, that goal list and things like that. And then the benefits makes time management organization more tangible for the students. And then they create their goals and focus on that specific employability skill that they need for that day. So it's really a day-to-day process rather than like a week-long process, which is something very important for the students. And then the measurements, they fill out steps 1 to 3 on a Post-it note as a bell ringer, and they use their class time to work and focus on their target skills, and of course their exit ticket, they reflect and evaluate on their work. So, thank you.
Okay, and the next we're going to talk about what it looks like school-wide. The plan is that we're going to integrate this into what we already have for our PBIS or the Warrior Way. We talk about being responsible, respectful, and ready to learn. We're going to kind of weave that in, so it's not a separate thing. It's kind of interwoven. And the plan is to roll it out for next fall. In that manner. I'm going to go ahead and let Christy talk about it because she's the one that worked on all of this part.
Yeah, so this is where I come in. I took their current behavior matrix and I kind of switched it over to the employability skills. So you see the mindset, the work ethic, learning strategy, and social and emotional skills. And their current behavior matrix had all the common areas listed out. Well, some of those were a little difficult to apply to the bathroom, for instance, with work ethic. So we came up with the idea for common areas. So there are no learning strategies to apply in the locker rooms. So, but if you go to the next slide, I created posters for each of those that goes into more details. So this just clearly defines expectations for each area of the building, which will help assist teachers, administrators, and all staff in teaching and reinforcing and modeling these expectations. Then in return, students can be recognized for meeting these expectations to earn wampum bucks, which they can go to the wampum store to buy keyboard covers, masks this year, hopefully not next year, but masks this year, and new student IDs and those kinds of things. So the wampum store just helps increase student understanding of expectations and positively encourage these behaviors that we want to see as they move through middle school and high school and on into the workplace.
Do you have any questions for us? Well, that's great.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Moving on to Agenda 4, approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from our March 8th regular board meeting?
So moved.
Mr. Hempsel, a second?
Second.
Mr. McRoberts, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh, discussion, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Any discussion? Being no discussion, if we could take a vote, all those,
Do it electronically or voice?
no, we're going to do it voice. Yeah, we're going to do it voice. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, nay. Carries unanimously. Moving on to the approval of the April 5th, 2021 Public Work Session meeting. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Mrs. Ward, do I have a second?
Second.
Mrs. Cherry, any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Carries unanimously. Moving on to financial reports. Mr. Parkinson.
The March 31st fund balance in our primary funds was $7,262,699.85. Education fund expenditures for the month of March, $1,100,331.04. No debt service expenditures. Operations fund expenditures for the month were $421,601.85. During the month, we transferred $183,552.02 from education to operations. And with the board's approval, this month we'll transfer $183,735.55. I'll add just two notes for the board's awareness. April is a 3 payroll month. This year it's April and October, so we're going to see higher expenditures when we get to the next board meeting. And then this is pretty minor revenue in the scheme of things for us. We get about $20,000 per month in local income tax revenue. So that's the first quarter of the income tax rate imposed by the county is spread among all taxing units, including school corporations. To us, that's about $20,000 monthly. There was some sort of administrative slowdown at the state level with distribution of those dollars. So instead of getting, we received $0 in March, but we'll receive about $40,000 in April. And I'd ask for your approval for the report.
I'll take a motion to approve the financial report as submitted.
So moved.
Mr. McRoberts, a second.
Second.
Mrs. Ward, any discussion? No discussion. All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Carries unanimously. Quarterly reports, Mr. Parkinson.
So 4 times per year, we do a report outlining where we stand relative to our budget year to date. At this point, we have spent or encumbered 20.05% of the education fund annual budget. For the operations fund, we have spent or encumbered 19.27%. So we're on pace, of course, to be well under budget. Those percentages are going to go up. Again, we haven't hit our 3 payroll months yet, so those will cause those numbers to increase. On the operations fund, we'll have some capital spending that happens over the summer. And then on the education fund, we will hopefully be in a position to offer raises to teachers and other staff in the fall, which will drive that number up. So I project that we'll end the year somewhere over 90% on the education fund, most likely between 80 and 90% on the operations fund. And then just kind of very last minute this afternoon, and I'll post this on board docs tomorrow, but I put together just a very simple summary report, 3 pie charts, just a really high level breakdown of the way that we have spent our money so far in 2021 and comparing that to the prior 2 years. So we're personnel heavy organization, of course. So far in 2021, about 86% of our expenditures have gone to wages and benefits. About 14% have gone to other things we pay for, the electric bill, natural gas, fuel for buses, that sort of thing. We compare that to the prior 2 years. We're going to land probably pretty close to 2020. We made a conscious choice in 2020 to shift some of our capital spending to general obligation bond as opposed to the operations fund, which lets us keep more dollars out of those 2 main funds in the classroom and going toward personnel costs. So there's lots of ways you can slice and dice the data, but I thought that was just one way of showing kind of where our dollars and cents go.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the claims as whoa, I got ahead of myself, sorry. Quarterly reports. Do I have a motion to approve the quarterly reports as presented?
So moved.
Mr. Hensel, a second.
Second.
Mrs. Ward, any discussion? No discussion. All those approved signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, nay? Carries unanimously. Approval of claims, Mr. Parkinson.
This month, for your consideration, we have $546,764.90 in total claims. $19,408.19 is pre-written. The remaining $527,356.71 we will pay upon the board's approval. A couple noteworthy ones this month. Probably the most noteworthy is the new playground at North Elementary. If you've not had a chance to see it yet, it's up and it looks good. We're excited for kids to get out there. We're getting mulch down hopefully this week, and so we should have kids out there any day. We also have Wayne Township bills this month. That happens, again, 4 times annually. This is for special services and for Area 31 billing. So I'd request your approval for the claims as submitted.
Motion to approve the claims is presented.
So moved.
Mrs. Ward, a second.
Second.
Mrs. Cherry, any discussion?
Matt, what's the life expectancy of the playground equipment? How many years will that last?
Well, when we've talked about it before, 20 years is a target that we've discussed as a reasonable amount of time. It requires upkeep, of course. I honestly can't tell you what the age of the last one was, but it was certainly time for a replacement.
Yeah, it looked, what we saw the other day looked like a nice setup.
Yeah, we think so too.
I think I've asked this before, but we've got AT&T and Verizon both on here. What are those for?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Rader.
Okay, thank you.
The Verizon bill is a couple of district cell phones for like our PACE program, so that
Okay.
parents can call and reach
Uh-huh.
people despite, no matter where they might be. The AT&T bill is for the circuit that, the AT&T bill is for a few of what I'll call POTS lines, Plano Telephone Service lines, and those are just copper-based phone lines for like our fire alarms and our fire panels, that sort of thing, that we didn't switch over to the Endeavor circuit, so that's what that bill is.
Do we have plans on switching those over?
You really don't want them to be on that type of circuit. You want them to be, it's one of those things where the old-fashioned method is kind of still the best way to go. I think once we were able to change our fire panels out in the buildings, which I don't know when that's going to happen, those might be able to communicate over the internet properly.
Okay.
And then we'd make that change then, but those fire panels are super expensive and, a couple of ours are fairly dated. So we would need that to happen to be able to make that switch over. But they're pretty, low per month costs. And we have kind of weeded those out and down as many as we can. And that's the very minimum number of lines we need.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is plain old telephone service a technical name, or is that?
Easy to remember, isn't it?
You can Google it, Tim.
Okay, I trust you.
Anything else? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Carries unanimously. Approval of payroll claims, Mr. Parkinson.
We have 2 payrolls for your consideration this evening. March 19th payroll, $603,577.10. April 2nd payroll, $596,894.97.
Motion to approve the payroll claims is presented.
So moved.
Mr. McRoberts, second.
Second.
Mrs. Cherry, any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Carries unanimously. Does anybody have any old business? No old business. New business. Consider approval of personnel recommendations, Dr. Schaefer.
Yes, and we present the personnel report without amendments this evening, so it asks the board's approval of it as presented.
Do I have a motion to approve the personnel report as submitted?
So moved.
Mrs. Ward, a second.
Second.
Mr. Hempsel, any discussion?
I have a quick question. The addition of the bus driver, does that bring us back up to what we were down, or are we still down, or?
I know it's still tight as far as the exact number. I don't know, does that bring us back to every route covered?
So
right
we
now?
do have every route covered. We had a resignation. We had a resignation that we knew was coming for an employee that runs his own business, and so we're still in a position where we could use ideally another 2 bus drivers if we could find them. But we do have full coverage right now,
Okay.
and even even some substitute coverage.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments? Being none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Carries unanimously. Consider approval of resolution of the FFCRA. Mr. Parkinson.
So this is a resolution that the administration has brought to the school board several times, and we're asking for the board's consideration again. What this resolution does is grants the superintendent the authority to make wage-related decisions in the interest of school employees, particularly as it relates to the pandemic. And so specifically, what we did after in January, when we last asked the board to approve this through the end of March, we continued the program that the CARES Act had implemented, where each employee is given up to 10 days of paid time away if they contract COVID or they're experiencing symptoms or they're quarantined. We still have a fair number of employees who are using that program, and we think it's in the interest of the safety of students and staff to continue it. So the resolution is the same as what we brought to you in January, and we're asking for your approval to make similar decisions through the end of our upcoming summer school session.
So it'll just run through the school year.
So it goes through the school year, and then we are asking to continue it. We have a few weeks of summer school, and we'd like to run it then as well. But by the time we get to next school year, if we're in a position where we need to do this sort of thing again, we'd be coming back to the board to ask for your approval again.
Motion to approve the resolution of the FFCRA is submitted.
So moved.
Mr. Hensel, second.
Second.
Mrs. Cherry, any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Carries unanimously. School board composition information, Dr. Schaefer. Oh, I'm sorry, skipped one again. School board policy update, Dr. Schaefer.
It's all school board policy, so we'll get to it. The policy before you tonight is there because we do not have a board policy about how the board would choose to go about naming facilities on a policy basis. So tonight, we're just asking for a first reading on a potential new policy for that purpose. So the draft version is actually put together from 3 different policies that ISBA had provided to us. They have some different pieces and things. You have to tailor those a little bit to your community. So I've drafted this together, and in the policy, we'll kind of walk through that, but there are a few decision points perhaps to make. The first part of the policy is if you were to name a new facility. Now, those types of things don't happen very often, but somewhere down the road, if the district were to build a new building or a new school or something like that, and you wanted to put that first name on it, this gives you a process and some regulations and guidelines to go about in determining what the name might be for a new facility. Secondly, part of the policy allows you, if you choose to name or rename existing facilities. So perhaps a building could be renamed, or a portion of a building, or a field, or something like that, if you wanted to name or rename a facility. And there are some guidelines and a process to follow as well. But in this, as I mentioned, there are some decision points. For example, a rule of thumb that's often used is you wouldn't name a facility or something after someone until perhaps they were deceased for 3 years, or perhaps if they retired from the school corporation for 3 or more years. And one thing to consider is, do you want to consider naming a facility after a retiree? Some boards may choose to use that as an option, and some may not. It would be how you set up your policy. Another thing you'll see in the policy that's italicized, and if I put something in there in italics, that means this is something to think about, a decision point. This policy calls for at least 3 meetings of deliberation by a board before they would choose to name something. In other words, you're going to let the public weigh in on that at least 3 times before making a decision on naming a facility. The third thing that's there is, do you, as a board, want to have a policy where you would name a facility after an individual? For example, if you were to have a new school building, you know, our elementaries are North Elementary and South Elementary. They're not named after individuals. You have Danville Community High School and Danville Community Middle School. Whereas, you know, somebody might have a George Washington Elementary School named after a person. Or do you want to name something or allow something to be named after a local person? Those are some decision points that you might choose to think about in determining your policy. So one of the clauses in there is just that. You know, you could have a position where as a board you say, we will choose to not name facilities after people. We will name them after geographic locations or things of that nature instead. Those are just some things to think about. And one additional consideration that some districts might choose to do, and we're seeing this more and more commonly used in today's world, if a benefactor were to provide a sizable donation to the district to help build a facility, would you consider naming the facility after the benefactor? That could be a company, it could be an individual, it could be a group. Those are some things to think about as well. So that is also drafted into this policy. And you can read through that. Be happy to answer any questions or any suggestions you might have tonight. What I plan to do is take those suggestions, bring this policy back at the May school board meeting for possible approval. We don't have to approve it on 2 readings, but you certainly could. So tossing it out there tonight and just kind of see what your thoughts are.
Any discussion?
Question, you said we haven't had a policy, so I'm thinking of Bostic Gymnasium.
Yes.
I mean, it's named after a longtime teacher. Was that named, I don't know when that building was named, was that still in possession of the school corporation when that was named? Or
I do not know. That's a great question.
does anybody know?
I can't remember what it was.
I don't remember it being called anything when we were in middle school.
I think it was Bostic Gym when I was in middle school there. Probably when you
I mean, the
were there.
plaque's on the outside, it says who it's named after, and he was a
Yeah.
teacher from, you know, X to X, and
But was he a high school teacher, or was that from when it was the college, or?
Probably important to remember too, if it were named before 1963, that would have been before the incorporation of the school district. It could have been named under the old Danville High School naming structure, whatever that may have been at that time prior to incorporation of this board.
I can't think of any other facility that is named after somebody, or.
I think you have to leave the door open though, in case you do get a sizable donation. You wouldn't want to have something written that says you couldn't name it after Tim McRoberts if you live.
Think that was a hint.
Gave $1 million.
Is it common, do most school boards have a?
I honestly can't tell you that. I've seen these types of policies in some respects be all over the place. What I do see that is pretty common is to have if you were going to name this after an individual or group or something, to have a waiting period. Particularly if someone's deceased, that there would be a reasonable waiting period before you chose to name a facility, just because there could oftentimes be a lot of emotion surrounding that. So I think that's a good policy and practice to have, and it gives kind of a vetting period to, just for some long-term consideration.
I don't think it's a bad idea to be able to name a facility or a field or the baseball, anything after somebody that important to the school district and the community.
I think it's important to have a policy, so when it does come along, we're ready, whoever's on the board at the time, or.
Yep.
I guess my question too would be, like, once you name a building, can that building 30 years from the time it was named be renamed? Or is that the name?
Now, I have seen some policies address that, and some will say no, and I would say more often I see yes, you can rename a facility, and you could even determine ahead of time how long that would be. So if you said, hey, we named this building or stadium or whatever it might be, that naming right only lasts for a particular amount of time. I think you could predetermine that if you wanted to, I don't know that's necessary. But
If I donate money and get a building named after me, there's gonna be a clause that says it cannot be renamed.
What about, so you've got the baseball field, I noticed, I don't know what brought this up, but Lawson's are under, do they have something to do with just the scoreboard? Or how
Usually,
that-
yeah, that would fall more in the area of advertising. So did make a contribution to the athletic department and probably will renew that every so often. So that would fall more under advertising
Okay.
than anything else, yeah.
Same with the football field has Hendricks,
Yes,
right?
yes. Those are good examples.
But those have an end time.
Yeah,
the
typically your
naming
advertising
rights.
period will have a 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, something like that term that will run and then has to be renewed in order to maintain the advertising. Good questions, good things to consider.
I would
So-
like to give it some more thought. I struggle with naming facilities after people, because it's a fine line that you walk, because you don't want to upset a group because you've left an important person out, just because this group is pushing this person. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's a very fine line you walk, so I want to make sure we give it all the consideration that we can before we
Yeah.
finalize whatever policy.
Another thing you could consider is you would name it after someone, it could be a local person, but who has rose to national significance. Those are some things that I've seen too.
Okay.
And that becomes the question is how do you measure the contribution that someone has made to education in your local community? It could be someone who has only a local impact, could be a statewide impact or national impact, and those are things you could determine as well. So let me ask you this, is there anything in here you just really don't like?
I don't like naming buildings. I think you get into a whole lot of problems doing it. Hurt feelings come in.
Yeah.
It just, I be coming from a football background. There's gonna be people that think Bob Pettigo was the greatest Danville coach. There's gonna be people that think Dick Burrows was the greatest football coach. We're gonna think Bob Copeland, Bob Gaddis, and all of a sudden we're gonna have a Pettigo, Burrows, Gaddis, Copeland field, and where does it stop?
So you're not, did you say buildings, but you're against buildings
I'm
and
against it
or
all
any, all of
because,
it?
then, you go through teachers that's gone through there, Russ Kurtz was a great teacher. Rosemary Helton was a good teacher. Mabel Gibbs was a great teacher.
Yeah.
Ellen it can go, you get out of the teachers, Mrs. Disney was a great cafeteria worker. My mom worked there. Hell, I want the cafeteria named after Ruth Mason.
I'll second that one.
She probably
How about
cost
the
the
shop class?
school more money and free food. It just, where does it end? Where does it end at that point in time? There ought to be a spot out on the football for Kenny Mason where he parked his truck for all the football games. So it just, I think it's a bad practice to get into because Danville's been lucky enough to have a hell of a lot of good people come through here that's been supportive in a lot of many different ways, whether it was employees at the schools, coaches, teachers, custodial staff, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, parents, fans, and then, you start putting this kind of level of this person was more important than this person, and, this community was kind of founded on and continues on with everybody's important in their own way, and, unless you get into, and this is modern day greed, I suppose, but unless you get into a benefactor that donates a lot of money, we're all important in this community, and everybody does what they do because of the pride that they have in the school system, and I just think it's wrong that we get into putting somebody on top of somebody else to name a building after them, and that's just my opinion on it. I'm done with my rant. Thank you for that.
That's good thoughts, yeah.
I guess
good
when
points.
I read it, I was thinking if someone would come to us, we would have a policy and a filter to use to say yay or nay. I wouldn't go seeking out to name a building just to name a building after somebody.
But if you have a policy in place to allow that, then, and we had the same thing with the baseball field here a few years back, that, we didn't do that then, but it just, if you have a policy that says we just don't name things unless, and you can put a benefactor in there and have an amount.
has to
Yeah, I
be
mean,
amount.
that's what I would
But
do.
just to open it up to have people come like that, I think is just it's gonna put perhaps this board or future boards, in a bad situation to make decisions that maybe we could prevent if we just have a no naming policy. But that, again, that's just my opinion.
Let me just clarify, you're speaking of naming after individuals, so if
Yeah.
we call it North Elementary or South Elementary,
Yeah.
geographic would be okay.
Yeah.
Name it something, but not after an individual
Yeah,
is what you're
after
speaking.
individuals or, groups, unless
Yeah,
they,
right.
I mean, we can name it the Mason Clan, but, get around that way, I'd be all right with that, I guess.
Do you have a
but-
particular facility in mind? All right, anything else as far as ideas, suggestions, or, hey, we love this, we hate that?
Well, I would just throw out, just because we're throwing out thoughts, when I was at Cascade High School many, many years ago, the debate came up, and what they ended up doing was their football field, they named Memorial
yeah.
Complex, Memorial whatever, and then there was a policy that somebody's name could be added, on the memorial plaque. So the field wasn't named after an individual, but there are individuals that are recognized at the football field as part of the Memorial Coliseum. And it's not limited to football coaches, it'd be anybody in the community or teacher, so that'd be another kind of in-between thing. And I would assume also, Corey's talking about buildings, the policy could say, we won't name buildings, but maybe athletic facilities. It could be written any way we wanted, correct?
That's correct. So, and it may take more discussion in a couple of meetings too, as you kind of get to what you're all comfortable with as a board in terms of a policy piece. So we can keep drafting and modifying and make some change, or give you some options within the policy to look at.
I did like the 2 citizens that would sit on that committee. It kind of brought it outside of just the school as to who would help make those decisions. I like that idea.
You say you do like
I
that?
do like that
Okay.
idea of 2 members from the community.
As far as choosing the name, right?
I'm still not a fan of it, but I did like that aspect of this policy.
I just use athletic facilities because that's usually what it is. Somebody
Yeah.
wants to.
Sure.
But the buildings are, whatever is fine. And for the record, I support Mr. Hempsel in that if Tim McRoberts wants to bring some money, I
You guys are
will
gonna
be a
woefully
hypocrite.
disappointed.
Yeah, I'll be a hypocrite and I will go back on my statement. And I'm all for naming buildings then.
Mrs. Chair, I think that process, even if the board chose to not name any facility after any individual or group, especially if you had a new facility, you would need to come up with a name. So that process could be used to come up with, even as a geographical name or something of that nature, to at least develop, 3 different options to give to the board.
Okay.
So, okay, well, let's give the board some time to think about it, and we can bring back maybe a couple different ideas here that we could bring back next time and decide whether you want to consider persons, and if you do, under what conditions would you, and we'll kind of figure it out as we move through time. So thanks for your feedback. It's a good discussion.
Okay, moving on to school board composition information, Dr. Schaefer.
Yeah, at last month's board meeting, the board had some discussion about school board seats and asked us to collect some information comparing the populations of Marion and Center Townships at the time of the school district incorporation. And compare that then to the present day population, where that stands. So we did that, and I appreciate Mr. Parkinson getting into some census data and looking up that information. And that breakdown was 84% of the population lived in Center back in 1960, which was just 2 or 3 years before the corporation was formed. That was from the 1960 census. and then 16% of the population lived in Marion Township at that time. At the present time, best that we can tell, this is based on the 2010 census, and then there's usually an estimate too. So we have a 2010 census number and 2019 census estimate, which were essentially the same. And so the population has shifted a little bit. It's now 90% population in Center Township and 10% in Marion Township currently. And it may be just a shade different than that as we've moved into 2021, but that's probably pretty close. We were also asked to compare the tax levy in Marion and Center Townships presently. So based on the 2020 numbers, which were year-end numbers, the total tax levy was 83% in Center Township and 17% in Marion Township generated therein. So just for comparison, the current board policy on school board composition, it provides for a maximum ratio of 80-20, so four center seats, so to speak, and one Marion Township seat, although there is the at-large. That's sort of the minimum. It'd be a 4-1. And then on the other end of it, the maximum would be a 60-40, which is what your current composition is in practicality. 60% center representation, 40% Marion representation. So generally the school board representation is based primarily on population count when you look around the state at school districts. Having the tax information is secondary to that, of course, but it's certainly helpful to kind of understand how the school district is comprised. So that's the information we have at present. I know that Mr. Kessinger was also doing a little background research in the statutory composition, which I'll let him talk to you a little bit about. I know he hasn't been able to get to all of it yet, but he can give you some preliminary information.
Yeah, basically, the beginning, the process would be a resolution if it was adopted by the school board. And then there's several variables that go into it after that resolution would be adopted. And it basically is much like a referendum type situation is what it would be. There's a possibility of voting it during an election, a primary or general election. And again, there are some variables, but that generally is what would happen.
So I think too, probably following that, I would assume it would have to go through the circuit court and through the Department of Education and
those are part of the steps that would go. Yes, it goes through as the constitutional court, the circuit court here in the county, and then through the State Board of Education also. You would submit that, and that's part of that process.
And that's after the resolution and before the voting?
After the resolution, as is steps during that as far as the voting and all are concerned.
I know looking back at, we did, Mr. Parkinson had found probably a year or two ago, the 1962 board resolution, and this is a process they went through. They first held a vote on school corporation between the two townships that comprise the district now and also the three that comprise what is now Northwest Hendricks School District. There was a vote there. And then the vote, that failed, so the vote then went to Center and Marion Townships, and that vote then passed. So there's a lot of process in determining those school board seats. So that was, Terry, my understanding from a little bit of research I did was you have to go back somewhat to that original plan and process and sort of refollow it if that's correct.
That is correct. You would submit the new plan based on whatever was decided by the board.
But I think as far as when you look at your population numbers, you look at your levy numbers and things like that, it appears that the board is well represented in both townships currently.
Any other questions or discussion?
Thank you for putting that information together.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Moving on, board policy review, Dr. Schaefer.
Yes, and that's exactly what this is reviewing our existing policies. So This month, we are still in the bylaws, and starting with bylaw 0150 and moving through, there's about 12 or 15 of them, to 165.4. And these are the bylaws that pertain to how the board is organized, a little bit of what we're talking about now, and your meeting structure. And as I went through those, they're pretty brief, to the point policies. They look to be in pretty good order. The one thing I did see that needs to be updated, policy 0164 and 0164.1, which is the calling of meetings, your regular meetings, does still say that we meet at South Elementary and we meet at 7 o'clock. So I know the board members are familiar that a few years ago, the board changed from a 7 o'clock meeting to 6:30. And then, of course, we changed location here more recently. So those are things that we would want to update in the bylaws and just make sure those reflect the current practice of the board. Quite honestly, we can do that administratively. I don't think that requires even a board action to make those adjustments. We would just go in and make those necessary changes. But I didn't really see too much else in those policies that look like they need adjusted or updated, but you may have, so I'll listen to your input as you have it.
Is our board organizational meeting really in July? Or do we do that in January?
It is now. Maybe I missed that. It is, yeah, and that's a couple different places in policy, because I know we changed that in another area. The law changed on that a few years ago. But yes, organizational meeting is now January, not July. Thank you. You know, I was looking at, because that says the 15th, I was looking at the date and not the month, so we can change that as well.
One thing I'd like to see added on the calling of the meetings, it says it could be called by the president or by the superintendent. I'd like to see added the president, or in his absence, the vice president.
Okay, I've got a note on both of those. Thank you.
Do we need to add anything about virtual voting if a school board member cannot attend a meeting?
We can. We might be wise to wait till the end of the legislative session here to make that change, just to be certain nothing gets tossed in or out at the last minute here. That's a great point, though. There may even be another place or two within the bylaws or policies to note that same opportunity. I'm going to make a note of that, though. I would almost guess if the legislature makes a permanent change to that we'll get some guidance from ISBA on some additional policy guidance to insert into the bylaws for that specific purpose.
And again, on the meeting agenda, where it says conferring with the board president, I would like to see added on that and/or vice president.
Which, do you have the number of that?
Yeah, that's on 166. That may be further on down, but yeah, 166.
Those items might be covered, and I'll do a little bit of research, or maybe one sort of general provision there. So it's always, if the president is available, it's the vice president is available, it's the secretary.
Okay.
But I'll do a double check on that and just be certain.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's good. You guys are paying attention, doing your homework. Good catches. Thanks.
Anything else? Okay. Moving on to the 2022-2023 school calendar. Dr. Schaefer.
Yeah, as the board had a chance to look at the proposed calendar that we sent out, we had a couple of suggestions about how to improve the calendar. and some of that time there prior to spring break. If the board would like, we can have the calendar committee take another look at the proposed calendar, consider those suggestions. We can then bring it back in May for approval as well. There's no pressure to approve it tonight if you would like to do that. So just as a sidebar to answer a couple other questions I got, we do plan to utilize some E-days during next year's 21-22 school calendar for professional development days for that purpose, and in the event if we would have inclement weather. So we're currently targeting to have 4 professional development days, I'll say roughly quarterly. I think as we looked at the dates, we would probably do one of those in the first quarter. The second quarter of the year tends to be kind of broken up by fall break and holidays, so we might skip that one and do a couple in the third quarter and one in the fourth quarter to allow some training time for teachers. And quite honestly, I think that's a good time. If you're going to take a day somewhere that students aren't going to be in session, it's probably better to give them a little bit of a break in that February, March timeframe as well. So we're beginning to finalize. We have some ideas. Want to talk to the teachers about those as well before we name those, but we'd like to name those days here yet this spring so people have plenty of time to prepare for next year. Now, that's not for the 22-23 calendar that's before you this evening. Like I said, that's a sidebar. I would say it's likely that we would use a handful of days in the 22-23 calendar, but again, it's a little too early to call those days. I think we want to kind of look at our experience next year as well before we would decide those for 22-23. They would still be school days. It would just be sort of the medium in which we offered that learning experience. Just looking to see if I had anything else here. No, that's really it. So, if you want to discuss the 22-23 calendar, please do so. But at the same time, we can take that back with some of the suggestions about looking at shifting around a couple of those days or E-days, possibly before spring break, and get the committee's input on that as well.
Can we also have them look at next year's calendar? As I put in my email, I'd like for us to make those adjustments next year if possible. At least to try it. I also noticed that we didn't have a day before President's Day. Like this year we got the Friday before President's Day off, and it was like a little winter break. I don't know, our family really enjoyed just that extra time. Didn't know, just a consideration for next year's e-learning day, if that would be a good place to put that, one of those days there as well.
Sure, yeah, happy to take a look at that. And this year was really unique,
Right.
just because we're intentionally trying to build a break there without extending the school year.
Right.
So there's, as you put the calendar together each year, there become usually probably 8 or 10 decision points to kind of think about where is a day best placed, and trying to maintain as many instructional days as we possibly can. 180 days of student instruction are required, although we do qualify for a waiver, actually a couple different ways. We qualify under performance qualified schools because of our high attainment level. And secondly, we applied for through the Department of Education a year ago and received a waiver under House Bill 1003 in the last legislative session. So we are able to not have a day, somewhere have 179 days or 178 days student school year as a result of that. But again, I think we want to be very judicious if we don't have a school day. Because seat time and student learning go very much hand in hand, so we always want to be careful with that. And I did have a couple of concerns expressed. We probably had more than a couple. Ashton probably knows better than I do, monitoring social media. But as we added a couple more E-days here yet this spring, I know we started to get a few more parent concerns about trying to cover younger kids, particularly at home, and parents working and things. So that's something we're trying to balance as well a little bit. But I think there's certainly opportunity to use some days, so it's just kind of figuring out where those best fit to meet families' needs best as possible.
Are we in agreement then that we want the committee to take a look at it and bring it back next month then?
And can they look at next year's calendar too?
Yeah, we
to
can.
give us an-
Yeah, I certainly want their input on that too. As far as shifting from an in-person day to an e-day, we've done that administratively, but it's still good to get everybody's input on that, so certainly.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to discussion of the field lights for the softball fields, Dr. Schaefer.
Yes, and our athletic director at the high school, Mrs. Harvey, is here this evening, and I appreciate her being here. So, Mrs. Harvey, I don't know if you have any particular updates, want to give the board a little bit of background on the proposed project, and I'll kind of fill in from there if that works for you.
Actually, I do have one really important update. We won the softball game against Plainfield tonight, 10-3. So the fact that our student of the month wasn't here, I happened to look at the score right after that announcement was made, and she, I promise you, I'm not making this up, hit a 3-run home run as soon as I looked. So thank you for letting her be here
She was
next
in the right
month.
place.
Yes. I actually, so this came about in a conversation with the coach, Greg Glazier. He approached me and mentioned that this had been something they'd talked about in the past, but that he'd had several parents and I think additionally some community members approach him about the possibility of doing some upgrades to our softball field. I think there was some hesitancy a couple of years back to make any changes because of the referendum that was up for a vote, and so now we're feeling like, okay, can we revisit some plans on that? And so he has done a tremendous amount of legwork as far as figuring out what a project would cost, talking to some community partners and that type of thing. I did get an update from him today that he said they are between 28 and 32,000, so he's calling it 30,000, and waiting to still hear back from a few more donors that potentially have some fairly large donations that they're willing to put forward. That prompted a conversation. Once he felt like he had a significant amount of dollars to put forward to this project, we then sat down with Dr. Schaefer and with Matt to discuss the project a little bit more seriously, because he wanted to make sure it was something that the corporation would be able to do before actual pledges for donation were taken. So we had that meeting. Obviously, this is a fairly quick turnaround time that we would be looking at, mainly because, well, there are definitely some factors that Dr. Schaefer could probably address a little bit more clearly than I can, but that would help to speed this process along, some requirements that don't necessarily apply to a project of this size and that type of thing. But also wanting to move while those donations are out there is a huge factor for this. So that's kind of how we got to the point of wanting to bring this to the board to discuss.
Yeah, very good. The lighting system they're considering, it's a Musco lighting system, which is probably the industry standard that's out there. It's a 4-pole lighting system for a softball field. And again, as Mrs. Harvey mentioned, we were recently approached with a proposal to install the lights with the team fundraising and getting in-kind donations to purchase the lighting system and get it installed ahead of their sectional time this school season. So they're hoping to meet that timeline, which I will tell you is very ambitious, but it might also be possible too, realistically. It presents a school corporation with a very tight timeline for the project completion, but it offers a significant savings to the district for the installation of lighting if it can be accomplished. This project is estimated to be about a $95,000 total project. That includes the lighting, the installation, the running the wiring, even the landscaping to finish it off when it's done. And what the team is proposing is to donate half of that amount to the district. It would be a district project. We would take on the project. They would then donate to cover that half of the installation and light purchase system. As Mrs. Harvey mentioned, a new field with lighting was planned for the girls as part of the high school referendum project. Presently, we're in a position where the baseball field has lights and the softball field does not have lights. So from an equity standpoint, we would like to see the girls' teams have lights on their field as well. And I think the partnership can be accomplished. I think it'd be a worthwhile project. The last I spoke with Coach Glazer, he believed we could meet the timeline with the fundraising and acquiring the lights in time as well, which from a supply chain standpoint right now can be challenging, but he's checked with the supplier and they are essentially promising that they have them and could get them here very quickly. As I mentioned, it would be a school project with a donation made to the school to cover approximately half of the project, of a approximate $95,000 total project. Now, I've researched this with bond counsel, and the project would qualify under a special provision of the public purchasing threshold. So this allows us to work with the donations because we do have here a significant potential savings to the district. It eliminates some of your requirements to have to go out and get additional quotes because essentially the cost is going to get cut in half. And we're under a tight timeline, and timing is an important issue here with this because, as Mrs. Harvey mentioned, you could potentially lose some of those donors to the district. I will tell you that prior to tonight's meeting, I also received a call from a benefactor who essentially promised me that the total threshold that they're looking for will be met. So I think that person is looking to donate in excess of the $25,000 or $30,000 they've already raised to make up the difference of their half. So as I understand it, essentially their financial obligation is already met as we sit here tonight. This threshold is this threshold is not at a level or a limit. It's not Mr. Roberts is on record. It's not him.
It's the Mason Hemsel McRoberts softball field.
So now, when Mr. Parkinson and I first got asked about this, we kind of sat back in our chairs and took a deep breath because we are mid-budget. You do have limits out of your operations fund of what percent you can spend on all athletic facilities in a year, and it's a pretty low percentage. We do have, in the 2019 general obligation bond, we have met or will have met all of our intended purposes of that bond. And within that, we will have just enough remaining to cover half of this in that bond. So it will not need to come from your operating funds. And it could be applied to the softball field. And that's how the baseball improvements were provided at that time as well. It was out of a GO bond. So I think it's something that I feel comfortable in recommending to move forward with. Again, it doesn't require board approval, but I would certainly want to know that there's consensus among the board to take this on because we'll be taking it on pretty quickly. We would actually have our maintenance director in charge of the project just to make sure that everything gets in place. But I know this group has worked very closely with Hendricks Power and Duke Energy, researching the project, the type of lighting. They're going to get a lot of in-kind labor from both of those organizations, so we'll have professionals working on the actual project itself. So thoughts from the board?
I know, I'm glad you bring up the equity part, because I think that's very, very important. I think the softball girls deserve this to be done. I think they've kind of taken a back seat through the years, not just here recently, but through the years. And we have an outstanding softball program. Those girls through the years have just busted their butts, and it shows they've done very, very well. And I think it needs to be noted that Coach Glazer has put a lot of personal time and a lot of personal money into maintaining that softball diamond through the fields or through the years. He's, I couldn't even begin to put into numbers the number of hours and the number of personal dollars that he's put into making that facility playable and what it is for the girls. And that's unfortunately shame on us that we allowed him to do that and we didn't step up to take care of that program like we have our other sporting programs. That's a true shame on the school corporation for putting that coach in that position, but God bless him for doing it. So however it needs to get done, we need to do this and thank the parents and all the benefactors that are stepping up to make this possible for the girls that are playing now and for the future girls that's going to be in that program. I think it's important to me to mention too that we're going to be hosting the sectional and regionals this year. And so the timeline.
Well, sectionals for sure. Regionals also does depend a little bit on
We're going to be
the
positive.
path to get there.
We're going to be positive.
Yes.
We're going to be positive.
Yes.
But that's going to be important for that. It would be embarrassing for us to have the opportunity to host those and a game run over into the dark and have to tell them we're not really set up
Correct.
to host that. You're going to have to come back tomorrow to finish the game. So, in a good representation of Danville and that Danville difference, it's really important to get this done and be good hosts for a tournament so that we can have that for years to come, because even this investment can have return and dividends down the road. So,
Absolutely. I think
thank you for heading, and again, thank you for putting my name first on the Mason Hensel McRoberts field. I do appreciate that.
Well, I think it would also be good to add that, in case you aren't aware, that we do have a JV softball team this year for the first time in several years. And with the talent that we have coming up, it looks like we'll be able to sustain a JV base or softball team for hopefully for the foreseeable future. So
Good.
And I've had this question asked just from various people over time is, well, if you put lights on a field, would you still build a new field sometime in the future potentially? And the answer is yes, because with the JV program, you really need two fields, and it makes sense to have them both lit, even if you did end up with two in the future somewhere. So it's certainly not a waste of resources. And quite honestly, this would be a real bargain in terms of the project itself on behalf of the school district. And yes, I appreciate your comments about Coach Glazer, because I know he essentially personally built their batting cages that are down there, and they're really nice. I mean, he did a quality job on those.
Yeah.
and I don't know that you could keep him off of the softball field, even if we gave him everything he needed. He would be out there still.
Yeah, he's been
Loves
very
it.
dedicated.
Yes.
Is that the last facility that doesn't have lights then? I mean, do the tennis courts have lights on them, don't they?
Sort of.
Well, that's another one that's in, that place,
Yeah.
those are bad.
Yeah, our softball facility and our tennis facility require the most updating. That's putting it very, very
Might,
kindly.
yeah.
Yeah. So the lights we've had trouble with on the tennis courts, and they're going to be due to be replaced, quite honestly.
There has been some work done on, as far as the timing system for the tennis lights, so that it's less confusing when we have tennis matches there, for them to be turned on when they're needed, when they need to be. So that's kudos to our maintenance department for making that happen. I will also say that Coach Glazer would tell you that really, aside from not having lights, our softball facility is a pretty top-notch facility in his comparison to the other facilities where they play. So he of course would not credit himself with that, but I think obviously that speaks a lot to the work that he has done out there. So
Yeah.
So consensus there
Yeah.
to move forward? Okay,
yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Thank you. That's
great.
all we need.
If I could, I just wanted to take one more second to ask you all to mark your calendars for the football ring ceremony. You'll be getting a more spelled out invitation for that, but it is coming up on Friday, April 23rd at 6 o'clock, and we would love all of you to be there if you are able to join us.
You're stealing my thunder from my
Oh.
superintendent's report.
Oh, sorry. Hey, never mind what I just said.
I do have a question about
Great
what you
segue.
just said, not to you, but really to the board. Like, we haven't recognized the football team Isn't that something we
Now you're
typically do?
really stealing my thunder.
Sorry. As I mean, don't we usually invite the football team to come in and recognize them at some point?
Can I address that? Because where I was going was,
Yeah.
we've kind of been looking for an opportunity to do just that. So one of the thoughts we had was if it would work for the boys program and what they're doing with the ring ceremony, we're thinking because that's outside, larger venue, that might be an opportunity also for the school board to do some recognition of the football team, perhaps at that event, rather than trying to squeeze a bunch of people in here or do something like that. So that literally is on my list tonight of things to inquire about. Would the board have interest? And if so, we could approach Coach Comer and Mrs. Harvey and
Yeah,
see if
I
there'd be a
think
way to do that.
my 2 cents would be that would be a great idea because Coach Comer has really encouraged the boys to be multi-sport athletes, and so a good chunk of them are participating in another team in the spring. So
Baseball, golf.
yeah,
That way we could
Correct.
catch them there
Yeah.
at that
Yep.
event. It's a great idea.
they will be there that night. That much I can promise you.
So we can talk about the particulars, how the board might like to do that. I know we also have a few other athletes that still need to be recognized yet too, and we'll bring those probably in May, as long as they're available. Those tend to be smaller groups and probably individuals this year, I think. That we can do here, but with the football team and that many young people, we thought, that might be a better opportunity to do that on the 23rd. So does that seem like a workable solution to all of you?
Yes.
And if all of the board can make it, great, and if not, then we'll take representatives that can represent the board to do that. Okay, perfect. We'll work on getting some of those things around. May I go ahead with my report?
Yes, sir,
Okay.
please do.
I
I don't want to interrupt you on the roll you're on. I'm afraid to interrupt you and go on with anything else.
Sorry about that. Just a quick update on North Elementary project. They were working to finish the footers on the, I guess that's more the west side of the preschool wing there for purposes of the room addition. They were finishing the entryway footers this week, hopefully on the, by the entry where the new hallway will be added out front for the secure entry. They've completed some of the central area lighting upgrades ahead of schedule. They don't have all the lighting upgraded yet, but it's certainly apparent where the new lights have been put in because they're LED. We have some in the library, for example, and some of those centralized areas, which is much nicer. They're going to begin some of the window replacement soon. I say soon, probably here in the next week or two. And then they'll begin setting steel on the new areas where they're putting the footers in now. So those are some of the next steps that will be happening at North Elementary. And I know Ashton has been taking some pictures and posting those to help keep our public up to date what's happening with the project. We appreciate that. I wanted to thank the board for doing the facility tours here recently. Thanks for investing your time to go through and review our school facilities. As you can see, there's much work to do with our buildings. I firmly believe that that can be accomplished within our present tax rate when we get to the point where we feel comfortable in moving forward. But we're going to need to revisit the scope and timeline to begin some of this additional work and get it accomplished now that the North Elementary project is underway. So I think we have to start looking at South and the high school and figure out what can we do with those buildings, what would the scope of that be, what would a timeline begin to look like. And those aren't conversations for tonight, but some things I think as we move through time we need to revisit a little bit. And I think you could see going through that there's certainly a need to begin to have that conversation. Just a reminder, the first week of May is Teacher Appreciation Week upcoming, which will be actually before our next school board meeting, so I want to get that on your radar. Also wanted to put out a couple congratulations. One to Mrs. Perkins for being selected to, she's still here, good, to IPLI, or the Indiana Principals Leadership Institute. She's been accepted into their 2-year leadership program. She's going to take part in, and I know Mrs. Webster and Mrs. No went through that previously and got a lot of benefit from it. So congratulations to Mrs. Perkins for being accepted in there. And congratulations also to Stephanie Stemke, our food service director, on receiving the Golden Delicious Apple Award from the Indiana Department of Nutrition. And that's for providing a wonderful variety of lunches and fresh options for students in our school lunch program. And think there were just 40 persons recognized across the state in all districts, and she was one of those that received that award here just this past week. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and for our favorite part of the night, Mr. Vice President, what can you entertain us with?
Mr. President, I feel like that's sarcasm.
It might be a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'd be thrilled to give you some legislative updates at this time. And so they're saying they still want to adjourn by the 21st of April, which would just be a week from Wednesday. So things are getting close to that time. And, honestly, all things flow in the direction of the budget at this point. It is a budget year. We've mentioned that time after time. And, I think a month or maybe 2 months ago, I talked about the fact that it's kind of a four-step process. The governor releases his budget, and then the House approves a budget, then the Senate approves, and that's kind of where it's at right now. So the Senate Appropriations Committee voted the budget out last Thursday, their version. It went on to its second reading on the Senate floor today, and that was a pretty long process. There were a total of, I think, about 34 amendments that were offered on the floor, and 28 of them were defeated. Those were all put forth by the Democratic Party. So not a whole lot of changes that came out of the appropriation. So it'll go to its third reading. That could be tomorrow, probably it'll be this week, definitely. And then from there, it'll go to its fourth phase, which is the conference committee phase, where they will hammer out all the final details, and that's where a lot of the hallway handshakes are made and deals are struck to get that final budget passed. But good news, bad news. With the Senate version of the budget that they released, they are calling for increases in funding for education for the next 2 years, 1.2%, which is about $92 million for fiscal year 22, and then up to 4.2%, which is about $316 million for fiscal year 23. So that's a good investment. They've also called for an increase in special education funding for both years, increase in ELL funding for both years, and the Senate version does restore the career and tech ed funding. I had reported on that about a month ago, that the House version cut out funding for what they call are the less than moderate value courses, things like cosmetology and culinary arts. A lot of students take part in. The Senate has reinstituted that funding, so that's good news. And I think that'll probably stay in through the final thing. And one, there's a lot of bad, not a lot of bad news, don't let me say that, but the Senate version only is calling for 85% funding for virtual students moving forward for the next 2 years. So this is a conversation that goes back a year when COVID came and we had all the students learning online. The governor put in the 100% emergency funding. There's legislation that has been signed by the governor this year that guarantees the 100% funding for this year. But moving forward in the Senate version, they only want virtual students funded at 85%. And I think the explanation there is they want to incentivize schools to go back full-time across the state. So we'll have to see how that works out. Hopefully that'll be something that goes back to the 100% funding when they get to the negotiations part. The choice scholarship portion, the Senate is also funding, so that's the increase in the vouchers and also the education savings account that I had reported on before. So that's bad news for us in the public education world, but the good part of that is when the House passed their version, those two programs were about $144 million in the budget. The Senate put caps on those, and it's only about a $47 million increase in the Senate's version. So 100-ish million less than what the House was proposing. And the Senate is also proposing that they increase the charter grant from $750 per student to $1,000 per student to help fund charter schools a little bit better. So again, that's how it's come out of the Senate thus far, and we'll see here in the next week or so. Be a lot of daily updates what's going on there. That's all I have.
Thank
All
you, sir.
smiles.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Okay, nobody signed up on our sheet to speak, but we would welcome any community input. If anybody has anything, step on up and give your name and address. There's nobody. Any announcements? There are none. The next board meeting, I'm being told, is May 10th, 6:30 here. May 10th. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mrs. Ward, a second.
Second.
Mrs. Cherry, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Thank you, folks, for coming. Appreciate it.